Are people cold? You're cold? Testing. Testing. What? Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We're on page 1. I want to thank our incredible staff for getting us all ready, and I want to thank you all for coming. If you're a little cold, you want to move your body, clap, dance in your seat. That'll warm you up. It's a joyful thing to celebrate Shabbat. Hadama v'shamayim chom ha'esh milamayim מרגישה בגופי, ברוחי ונשמתי. Repeat after me. Love the earth, love the sky, heat of fire, sound of water. Together I can feel it in my body, in my spirit, in my soul. Hey, 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 after me. Adama ושמיים, חום האש, צליל המים, אני מרגישה בגופי, ברוחי ונשמתי. היי, 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 you sounded beautiful. Page 2, Shalom Aleichem. Shalom Aleichem, Malachei Hasharet, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Boachem Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Shalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Seichem Leshalom, Malachei Hashalom, Malachei Elyon, Melech Malachei Hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. This would be a very good time to take a very deep breath. And now let it out. One more time. Let it out. Maybe a third time. What do you think? We're so lucky to be able to breathe. It's a blessing, isn't it? Let's make the blessing over the candles. Is there someone who'd like to lead it? Okay. Amen. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Ya la 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 la. Shel Shabbat. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav vetzivanu lehadlik ner vetzivanu lehadlik ner vetzivanu lehadlik ner Shel Shabbat. We've welcomed Shabbat. Would you like to lead Kiddush? Go ahead.
Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam borei beri hagafen. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam asher kiddushanu b'mitzvotav ve'ratza b'anu Shabbat kitzo
Yahava uvratzon hinchilanu. Everyone. Zikaron lemahaseh v'reishit kihu yom tehila lemikrei kodesh zecher l'tziat Mitzrayim kivanu v'acharta ve'otanu kidashta mikol ha'amim ve'shabbat kodeshecha ve'ahava uvratzon hichaptanu baruch atah Adonai mekadesh hashavat l'chaim. Yasher Koach, good job. We're on page 4 now. Barbara Fallick, you want to lead us in the Motzi? Yes? Keep your mask on though, okay? Could you keep your mask on? Thank you so much. Amen. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamotzi lechem min haaretz. Amen. Let's take another deep breath and join together in the Shema. In the middle of page 4. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. R'shem kavod malchuto l'olam v'ed. Shoshana, you want to lead the Hafta?
נפשך ובכל מאודיך, והיו הדברים האלה אשר אנוכי מצווך היום על לבביך, ושיננתם לבניך ודיברת בם בשבתך בביתך ובלכתך בדרך ובשוכבך ובקומך, וקשרתם לאות על ידיך והיו לטוטפות בין עיניך, וכתבתם על מזוזות ביתך
Beautiful. At the bottom of page 4, the English, the very bottom of page 4, that last line, let's read it together. Love the eternal your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. We're on page 5, and I want to make a blessing for anybody who's in need of healing. Mi shebeirach avotenu Avraham Yitzchak v'Yaakov v'imotenu Sarah Kavrachav Alea Hu Yivarech v'Yarpeh et kol hakehila shalanu, Los Angeles Jewish Home. May the one who blessed our ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, and Leah, send your blessing of healing to all members of our community and our extended community that are in need of healing. All of our residents that are in need of healing and their loved ones. All of our rehab patients that are in need of healing and their loved ones. All of our staff that is in need of healing and their loved ones. All of our volunteers and supporters that are in need of healing and their loved ones, that they should all have a refuah shlema, complete healing of body and of spirit, along with all those among the people of Israel that are struggling for wholeness. And we say, Amen. And now a blessing for everyone. May God bless you and keep you. May God's light shine upon you and be gracious unto you. Yisa Adonai, Yisa Adonai, Panav Elecha v'yasem lecha shalom. May God gaze upon you and your loved ones and give you the blessing of shalom, of peace. Ken Yiratzon, may it be God's will. Amen. We're on page 5. We're going to make Kaddish. I want to call to mind all members of our community that have passed in recent weeks or even in this past year. And we memorialize anyone whose yard site comes at this time of year, any of your loved ones. Today, 2 members of our community from JK were laid to rest. One person that you may not know as well because she wasn't here that long, Jerry Kaplan from JK2, and also someone that most of us know, our resident council president, Edith Frankie. And I want to sort of dedicate this service to her. I'm going to do a little Torah teaching in a minute, and when we learn and study Torah, it's not uncommon to do it in honor of anybody, and I think if you don't object, I'd like to do our learning today in honor of Edith because she was such a phenomenal student of Torah. So in memory of all of them, we make the Kaddish prayer. Yitgadal v'yitkadash shemei rabbah. Be'alma divrach chirutei ve'amlich malchutei. B'chayechonu v'yomechonu v'chayei d'chol beit Yisrael. Ba'agalav v'zman kari v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevorach le'olam u'lolmei almaya. Yibarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yidromam v'yitnaseh. V'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei d'kudashah brichu. Le'ela mikol birchata v'shirata. Tishbechata v'nechabata. Damiran be'alma v'yimru amen. Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chayim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. L'seh shalom b'imromav v'yaseh shalom. Aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru amen. May the source of peace and peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved, and we say amen. You can turn to page 6, and that's where we'll go when I'm done sharing some thoughts about Torah. So this week's Torah portion is rich with great stories, but the one I want to talk about today reminds me a little bit of Edith, and that's why I want to do a teaching on it, because it has to do with standing up for what is right. Standing up for what is right. And it has to do with somebody focusing on ethics and values as the most important driving force in their lives. So this is an amazing story because it has to do with God's relationship with our ancestor Abraham, the patriarch of the Jewish people. As a matter of fact, this part of the story goes like this. The Torah tells us that God asks God's self, should I tell Abraham what I'm about to do? In other words, God is nervous about making Abraham disappointed or unhappy. But God musters up the courage to tell Abraham what he's going to do, what God is going to do. And God comes to Abraham and says, Abraham, I need to tell you something. And Abraham says, what is it? And God said, well, there are these 2 cities that are horrible. They're called Sodom and Gomorrah. And in these 2 cities, people are really mean. They're very cruel. They're very harsh. And they don't change. They don't get better. They just are rotten people. And so I've decided, God says to Abraham, that I am going to wipe out for one sec. This part of the story reminds me of Edith, because when Edith would go into high schools and middle schools to talk to kids about the Holocaust, she didn't say to them, be nice to Jewish people, or there should never be anti-Semitism. That's not what she said. She said, never hate. Don't hate anyone. So Abraham feels like God hates these 2 cities of people. And Abraham can't take it. Abraham says, far be it from you, God, to destroy these cities. What if there are 50 good people? God says, fine. If you can find 50 good-hearted, good-behaving people in Sodom and Gomorrah, I won't destroy the cities. Well, then Abraham uses lawyer techniques. He's the first Jewish lawyer, I decided. And he says, well, if you would save the cities for 50 good people, what if there are 45 good people in Sodom and Gomorrah? So God says, well, that's reasonable, okay. if you can find 45 good people in Sodom and Gomorrah, I promise I won't destroy the cities. And then Abraham says, well, in that case, what do you think he said? What if there are 40, right? 30, 20, and all the way down to 10. And by the way, when Abraham says to God, God, what if there are just 10 good people? Are you still going to go ahead and destroy these cities and let 10 innocent people die? And God says, if you can find 10 good people, I will save the cities. And by the way, from that comes a couple of Jewish traditions. One of them is that you need 10 Jewish adults for a minyan. What's a minyan? A minyan is a quorum so that you can do certain prayers that you don't do when you're alone, like mourner's prayer, for example. That's the source of 10 being significant as a substantial number of people. It's also the source for the tradition that you shouldn't live in a city, if you're Jewish, that has less than 10 Jewish people, because you won't have community. Like, we have community here. We're very lucky. But if you lived in a place where there's just a handful of Jewish people, how could you have prayer? How could you have Shabbos? You need community for celebration, is the idea, right? So that's where that comes from. So anyway, the story goes, unfortunately, there aren't even 10 good people in those cities. So Abraham goes to the one family he knows that's good, and he says to his nephew Lot, you and your family better get out of here, because you see what's going on, and God is unhappy. And so Lot and his wife and their children run out of Sodom and Gomorrah, and they are told, don't look back. Don't look back. But Lot's wife can't stop herself, and she looks back, and what happens to her? Do you know the story? Yeah, she turns into a pillar of salt. And by the way, if you go to the Dead Sea, near Masada, there are some salt formations, because the Dead Sea is called the Dead Sea because it's so salty that nothing can live in it. And you'll see salt formations, and if you have a good tour guide, he'll say, or she will say, look at that one, that's Lot's wife. That's just kind of a kitschy tourist thing. But from that, we also learn something about Edith, or something that Edith taught us. May she rest in peace. This idea of don't look back. Edith was in 5 concentration camps. She suffered a lot. She lost 2 of her siblings and her parents in Auschwitz. But she didn't look back, and she did look back. She did look back in looking for the lessons and remembering her loved ones. But she didn't let her past define her future. And it's a great lesson for us, because many of us feel remorse, we feel sadness, we feel loss. Some people feel guilt of mistakes that you've made or things you didn't do that you might have wanted to do. And you look back, you know what happens? You turn into a pillar of salt. You might as well be a pillar of salt, because it's so depressing to look back on the hardships of your life and kind of stay stuck on that. You can't. Even the losses. We have to find a place for loss in our hearts so that we're not looking back all the time. What do they say? If you live in the past, you get depressed. If you live in the future, you get anxious. So live in the present, because the present is a present, right? And I think that this present is really a present for me, because I get to be with all of you. Any questions or comments about the Torah portion, or anything anyone wants to say? Should we continue our service? Let's continue our celebration of Shabbat on page 6 with Oseh Shalom.
Penny? God is looking down on us, and he's very happy. Look at us. We're here. That's today. Thank you, God. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Penny. That's beautiful. Penny said that God is looking down on us and is happy with us. Page 6. Oseh Shalom. Shalom, Ya'aseh Shalom, Shalom Aleinu, Ve'al Kol Yisrael, Ya'aseh shalom, Ya'aseh shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, Ya'aseh shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, Ya'aseh shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Ya'aseh shalom, Ya'aseh shalom, Shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Could we bring the microphone, please, to Ellen Melly, right up here? Hinei Matov is on page 6. Ellen will lead us. Let's keep going. It's okay. Hinei Matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hinei Matov, shevet achim gam yachad. Hinei Matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hinei Matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hinei Matov, Hinei Matov, la 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 la. Hinei Matov, Hinei Matov, la 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 la. Hinei Matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hinei Matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hinei Matov u'manayim, ya la 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 la. Hinei Matov u'manayim, ya la 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 la. Hinei Matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hinei Matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. Hinei Matov u'manayim, ya la 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 la. Hinei Matov u'manayim, ya la 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 la. At the bottom of page 6, Lachado D, we just said the words Hinei Matov u'manayim, shevet achim gam yachad. This is what it means. Behold, it's so good to sit together as brothers and sisters. And that's what we do. We're family, aren't we? We are. Lachado D greets the Sabbath bride, page 6 at the bottom. Lechado D, likrat kala, penei, Shabbat nekabla, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom, Shabbat shalom u'mevorah. The Shamru is on page 7. More than the Jewish people have kept Shabbat, Shabbat has kept us as a people. And you know, Shabbat is not just a day of rest. It's so much more than that. First of all, it's a day about employee rights, because our ancestors said don't work anybody 7 days a week. It's unethical. Our ancestors said that 3,500 years ago. Not a coincidence that so many Jewish people were on the labor rights movement and union rights and all that, because we don't want to take advantage of employees. It's unethical. And Shabbat is not just a day of rest because it's about memory for a lot of people. Collective memory as a people, but also people have childhood memories of Shabbat and memories from raising children or grandchildren. And Shabbat is also not just a day of rest, but it's a day of holiness, because human beings have the capacity to live a holier life than they're currently living. So what if once a week you practice? Once a week you practice living a slightly more holy life than usual, and then maybe it spills out onto the other days. Page 7. Veshamru b'nei Yisrael et ha-Shabbat la'asot et ha-Shabbat לדורותם בברית עולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם בברית עולם ביני ובין בני ישראל אותי לעולם אותי לעולם ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם בברית העולם כי ששת ימים עשה אדוני את השמיים ואת הארץ ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם בברית העולם וביום השביעי שבת וינפש שבת וינפש שבת וינפש ושמרו בני ישראל את השבת לעשות את השבת לדורותם בברית העולם. Thank you all for coming. We're going to conclude now on page 8 with Adon Olam. And before we do, I just want to say a blessing on your head. You are a blessing when you came here, Baruch atah b'voecha. And you should be a blessing as you go on your way. Baruch atah b'tzeidecha. Not only should you be a blessing, you will be a blessing. You are a blessing. We're on page 8. Before we sing it, let's take one more deep breath today. Adon Olam Asher Malach B'terem kol Yetzir Nivra Ein Nasa B'chefso kol Azay Melech שמו נקרא ואחרי ככלות הכל לבדו מלוך נורא הוא היה והוא יהיה בתפארה אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעד נעשה וחסך כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא אחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא עובד הוא יהיה בתפארה אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעד נעשה וחסך כל אזי מלך שמו נקרא אחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא עובד בתפארה והוא היה והוא עובד בתפארה. The last stanza. בידו הפקיד רוחי ואת אישם והעירה ועם רוחי גביעתי. God is with me, so I will not be afraid. God is with me, so I will not be afraid. Adonai li, Adonai li, velo ira. Adon olam asher malach b'terem kol yitzir nivra le'ed nasa b'chefso kol azay melech shemo nikra אחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא עובד הוא יהיה בתפארה אדון עולם אשר מלך בטרם כל יציר נברא לעת נשא וחפצו כל זי מלך שמו נקרא אחרי ככלות הכל לבדו ימלוך נורא והוא היה והוא עובד בתפארה, והוא היה והוא הווה, בתפארה, והוא היה והוא הווה, בתפארה, והוא היה והוא הווה, בתפארה. שבת שלום.